Hi, I'm Zoe Dawes, also known as the Quirky Coach, and I'm going to share with you some of my top tips for writing. Writing is one of those lovely creative things that you can do with very little equipment. All you need is a pen and paper or a laptop, phone, etc. And with some simple, easy tips, guidelines, then you can very quickly get to produce some very nice pieces of writing that you might enjoy sharing with your friends and family, maybe in a blog or who knows, even the beginnings of a book. So these are my top 10 tips for writing success. And it comes from the fact that for 10 years I was a travel blogger. I travelled all over the world writing my blog, The Quirky Traveller, and was very fortunate to experience some wonderful places which I wanted to share with my audience through writing. So after that, I then went into teaching creative writing for people who wanted to express themselves more. So I'll just go through these, and I've got one or two examples of writing to illustrate for you. So the first one is write simply. Do not try to impress, and focus on taking your reader on your journey with you. If you can imagine a best friend or somebody that you really want, your ideal reader, if you like, just imagine writing for them. It's not a place you don't need to be using great long words and complicated sentences. In fact, some of the very best writers, their writing is very clean, very clear, and very simple. Become a specialist and have a niche that gives your readers a reason to seek you out. As I said, I was a travel writer, and in fact I've specialised more in culture, food, the arts, and more recently in mind, body, spirit travel, and those are all niches that when people are looking for something, you can find them a bit easier. But you might want to write a novel, it might want to be a psychological thriller or a historical book. But having a niche, having a little specialism is a good idea and helps you in your own thinking when you're creating your writing. And a great example of that is Bill Bryson. Many of you will know lovely Bill from all his different books, films, TV series, etc. But I thought you might be interested because I live in Carnforth, up in the northwest of England, and he wrote about visiting Blackpool and Morecambe and even Carnforth, where I live. So I thought you might like to hear a little bit of his description of walking on Morecambe Beach, Morecambe Sands, and just noticing the language. So this is travel writing, clear, clean, simple language. Feeling daring, I walked a few hundred yards out on the sands now, studying worm casts and the interesting corrugated imprints left by the receding waters, and keeping an eye out for quicksand, which isn't really sand at all, but silty mud, and it really does hoover you up if you blunder into it. The tides at Morecambe don't rush in and out like the Severn Bore, but creep in from various angles, which is all the more menacing since you can easily find, if you're the sort to get lost in thought, that you are suddenly stranded on a large but insidiously shrinking sandbar in the middle of a great wet bay. So I kept my eyes out and didn't venture too far. Great language there. If you've been to Morecambe Bay, you'll recognise it immediately with the corrugated sands, and also that great description of the way that the sinking sand can hoover you up. So number 3, show, don't tell. Be discriminating with descriptive language, which can slow down narrative. Now, in the olden days, and I would count when I used to teach English, literature was bedecked with adjectives, great long flowing adjectives. Keats' poetry is a great example of that. But nowadays we tend to prefer a cleaner, simpler language. Having said that, I generally ignore all of that because I absolutely adore descriptive language, and I'm sort of known for it in my own writing. But I have to say, if you read most things today, you'll find that descriptive language, there is less of it. It's more about actually letting the experiences show them rather than tell. So rather than saying he was hot and sweaty, you might say something like the sweat dripped down his forehead as the sun broiled him from the inside out. Use your own experiences, certainly when you're starting out writing. I mean, they always say use the experiences of yourself, but don't be afraid to use your imagination as well. And that counts for whether or not you're writing your own novels, or whether or not it is more of a factual piece. You can put your own thoughts and feelings into it, unless you're writing an academic piece. And also, imagination. In this time of lockdown, I think we can let our imaginations run a bit more and incorporate some of that into the writing. Another very important thing, really important, I have to say, is to create a good opener that hooks your reader's attention straight away. It's really important that you get that opening sentence quickly, because in this day of short attention spans, openers are vital, because otherwise people will bob off and they'll either read another book or they'll read another blog post or whatever. And compose a mental picture where all the senses are used. So have a think about, what does the place feel? How does it make you feel? What smells are there? What's the touch of things? Again, with Bill Bryson there talking about the corrugated, we get that feeling and image of corrugated sands, so that people can actually experience it with you. I'll just share with you a piece that I wrote a few years ago. I was lucky enough to go out to the Caribbean, to a lesser known island called St. Kitts. And when I came back, I wrote an article about the rainforest there, which isn't what you normally think of when you go to the Caribbean. And in fact, this piece actually won the Caribbean Tourism's best journalism article the year that I went. And the opener, I was trying to capture this feeling, this sort of sensory smell that there was in this very, very hot and steamy rainforest. So this was the opening paragraph that I wrote. Ah, there it is. At last I catch the scent of the place. Peppery, leafy, smoky, fresh, salty, sweet, tangy. Yes, tangy, and definitely exotic to someone from the north of England. I am standing on the edge of lush rainforest beneath a beautifully twisted gnarled tree with fronded leaves and vibrant scarlet flowers. The flamboyant tree, or the Royal Poinciana, is the national emblem of St. Kitts and gives an exuberant welcome on my first visit to the Caribbean. And I was trying to catch, it was that peppery thing. You know how everywhere sort of smells different? And actually, because of spending, going straight from the airport to a sort of luxury hotel, I'd not really got a smell of the sense of the island there. And this was my first experience. So hopefully that captured it a little. So composing a mental picture using all the senses. This was number 6, so that you can see, hear and feel the experience. And then also create compelling, relatable characters and plot carefully. Now, I've basically thrown in that one tip, everything you need to write a good novel. But as I said, I'm not a novelist, and compelling, relatable characters, I describe people, but in creating characters, those of you that are interested, there's a huge amount out there, but they must be relatable. I must be able to relate to some aspect of them if I'm going to really want to find out about them, or be intrigued, compelling, that I may not know nothing about anything. It might not relate to my own life, but I'm intrigued to find out more. And a great example from one of my absolute favourite novels is Jane Austen's Emma. This is the copy that I actually had when I was at school as a teacher, teaching literature. And the opening chapter here is about the main character. So Jane Austen was really good at describing people, and obviously her plots were homely and very, homely if you moved in those circles, and very sort of down to earth, everyday things that her readers would have been able to relate to. So the opening paragraph here is: Emma Woodhouse, handsome, clever and rich, with a comfortable home and happy disposition, seemed to invite some of the best blessings of existence, and had lived nearly 21 years in the world with very little to distress or vex her. So I think you'll agree that just sums up this young woman who's living a life of luxury and with very little to bother her, which kind of sets the tone, doesn't it, for the fact that maybe we're about to find out something that might vex or bother her in the future. So then find an original angle, take a different view on a familiar subject. As a travel writer, people often say to me, well, how can you write about, somewhere that's been written about 100 times? I had that experience when I visited Rome, and I mean, how many words have been written about Rome? But actually, I zoomed in on little scenes, little things that perhaps the main visitor wouldn't notice, or something unusual. So when I was at the Colosseum, I was actually focusing on two mounted policemen who were on beautiful horses that everybody was admiring, and I was actually admiring the horses and the very good-looking mounted policeman. So yeah, try and find something a little bit different. There's always a different way of looking at things, and if your writing can find that, because let's face it, the number of plots, the number of themes, the number of places, everything, most things have been written about now, but we can always find a new way of looking at it for a new audience. Number 9, really important, avoid cliches and overused phrases such as breathtaking view, vibrant culture, life's a beach. We're all of us guilty of it, but it's really good to be aware of it. And when you're reading back, just think of a different way to say something. One of the activities that I do when I'm teaching creative writing is to get people to look in magazines, and that's a great place for finding cliches. I do remember a couple of years ago, one person in one, I think it was a travel magazine, found the phrase "life's a beach" 3 times in one magazine. And finally, be patient. It takes time and energy to develop your writing style. It won't come straight away, and those of you who are maybe already started your writing journey, if you look back to when you started to now, you'll find that it's changed. I look back to, I started my travel blogging in 2009, and I look back to some of those first articles, and I write very differently now. So you do evolve, but it's important to know that it can take time to develop, but it's really worth it, and it's a great way to express yourself and to share things with others. And we've all got a bit more time to read now. So I'll just finish off with an article that I wrote about Mykonos, which hopefully demonstrates some of the things that I was talking about in your top 10 tips. Sunlight dapples the water in glittering flashes. A wooden rowing boat bobs from side to side. A seagull protests as another grabs a fishy delicacy from the deck of a fancy yacht. A trio of white ducks troop out of the water and off down a stony lane. The rich and tempting smell of barbecuing meat drifts across from a nearby garden. All around is colour and light and warmth, and an almost indescribable feeling of tranquility and harmony. Well, I hope you've enjoyed those top 10 tips. If you'd like to read more, you can find it on thequirkytraveller.com, my travel blog, and also if you'd like to find out more about the coaching and the help that I give people for writing, then do visit zoedoors.com. And I wish you all the very best, and hope that you are making it through this time with as much creativity as possible.